this is a huge challenge that we face collectively. And I would argue that actually what we're trying to achieve here is tougher than what was achieved at Paris. Paris was a great historic agreement, but it was a framework agreement, and a lot of the detailed rules were left to later COPs. And now, after 6 years, we still have to resolve some of those issues. And of course, the geopolitics is also more challenging than at the time of Paris.
In a word, if you fail here, that will be catastrophic.
Well, the world needs to come together and ensure that we are doing our bit to limit global temperature rises.
It's the word you used.
But I think it's important to put into context where we have come from. Before Paris, analysts were saying that we were heading towards 6 degrees of global warming. After Paris, that temperature curve was bent to below 4 degrees. And if you look at recent reports from the International Energy Agency, for instance, they tell us that because of the commitments that have been made in the last year or so, that temperature curve has been bent towards 2 degrees. So there has been progress, but of course there's more to do.
The real figure that matters is 1.5 degrees maximum global warming. How likely do you think you're going to have a hard agreement to get to that by the end of this conference in 10 days' time?
Well, it's going to be very, very tough, as I said. And what countries are calling for, and I know you're going to be talking to others as well about this on this programme, but what they're saying is that if we look at all the commitments that have been made, and I said we're heading towards 2 degrees, how is it that over this next decade, indeed over the next few years, we close that gap so that we get closer to 1.5? And that's something that I'm going to have to try and build consensus on at this COP.
The UN says that at the moment we're heading to 2.7 degrees. You yourself have said that would mean 1 billion people facing really, really severe heat and the death of all the planet's global coral reefs. That would be catastrophic. That's where we're going for now. So I say to you again, people will be really interested. Do you think you can limit this to 1.5 degrees in Glasgow or not?
Well, firstly, just, if I may say, the 2.7 degrees that you've talked about relate to the 2030 emission reduction targets. If you they don't take into account all the net zero commitments that have been made. And I would just say, Andrew, that when we took this thing on, less than 30% of the global economy was covered by a net zero target. We're now over 80%. Most of the G20, in fact, have signed up to net zero commitments. So if you take all of that into account, we're heading towards 2 degrees. But I agree with you. We need to make sure that we are heading lower than that. And that's why we need to ensure that we get an agreement at this COP.